Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. Coming up in the next hour, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds talks with his Austrian counterpart in Vienna, says dialogue and diplomacy must to end conflicts. India's Prime Minister and Austria's Chancellor hold talks on several critical global issues. Both leaders decide to provide strategic direction to their bilateral ties. Foreign ministers of BIMSTEC member states arriving in New Delhi for talks on the 11th and 12th of July. Meeting will present an opportunity to broaden and deepen cooperation across various sectors. US President Joe Biden pledges to defend Ukraine at NATO summit in Washington, D.C. New commitments of military aid to Ukraine announced. And Spain beats France to reach Euro 2024 final, will face the winner of the match between England and the Netherlands. India and Austria have elevated their cooperation ties to a strategic level, signaling new possibilities in several dynamic fields. India's Prime Minister and Austria's Chancellor held talks in Vienna. The Indian leader reiterated that this is not the time for war.
A friendship cast in stone, a bond which has weathered the test of time. And now India-Austria relationship has been elevated to a higher level with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the Central European nation. In a historic visit, the first by an Indian Prime Minister to Austria in 41 years, both countries have agreed to elevate their ties to a strategic one with a 10-year roadmap. Prime Minister Modi and Austrian Chancellor held talks over several critical global issues.
हमने निर्णय लिया है कि संबंधों को स्ट्रैटेजिक दिशा प्रदान की जाएगी। इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर विकास, इनोवेशन, रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी, हाइड्रोजन, वाटर एंड वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट, आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस, क्वांटम जैसे क्षेत्रों में एक दूसरे के सामर्थ्य को जोड़ने का काम किया जाएगा।
The two leaders discussed the Ukraine and West Asia conflicts and reiterated the need to establish peace through progressive talks.
मैंने पहले भी कहा है, यह युद्ध का समय नहीं है। समस्याओं का समाधान रणभूमि में नहीं हो सकता। कहीं भी हो, मासूम लोगों की जान की हानि स्वीकार्य नहीं है।
India is the biggest democracy in the world, and therefore India's role, especially for Austria, is more than important when it comes to the peace process and future peace summits.
Prime Minister Modi also met Austrian President Alexander van der Bellen in Vienna. Both leaders held talks and discussed several issues of mutual and global interests. To further strengthen economic ties, Prime Minister Modi and Austrian Chancellor jointly addressed renowned Austrian and Indian CEOs at Roundtable Business Meeting in Hofburg Palace. Prime Minister highlighted significant potential for collaboration between Indian and Austrian companies in new and emerging technologies. Prime Minister also invited Austrian companies to invest in India. Earlier in the day, Prime Minister Modi was accorded a ceremonial reception at the Federal Chancellery in Vienna, Austria. PM comes at a time when both nations are marking 75 years of their friendship.
After this visit to Vienna, the relationship is supposed to get a quantum jump. And that is what these two leaders have talked about. And they've also offered to act as bridges of peace in wherever the world is in conflict, because that's something that the world doesn't need. It needs to move forward towards progress in a sustainable manner. This is Gautam Roy in Vienna, Austria for DD India.
Now, India and Austria are celebrating a significant milestone in their diplomatic relations. India and Austria are marking 75 years since the establishment of their bilateral ties. DD India's Meher Mercury gives you a comprehensive overview of India and Austria's multifaceted relations in the next report.
The world's fastest growing economy, India, and a key Central European player, Austria, are commemorating 75 years of bilateral diplomatic ties. Diplomatic relations between India and Austria were established in 1949, heralding a robust and amicable partnership founded on shared values of democracy and pluralism. India intervened in favor of Austria during its negotiations with the Soviet Union on the State Treaty of Austria that resulted in the independence of Austria in 1955. Against this backdrop, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Austria holds special significance, making him the first Indian Prime Minister to visit the country in over 40 years. India sees Austria as a strategic partner, presenting significant opportunities for cooperation in sectors such as infrastructure, renewable energy, high technology and startups. Now let's take a look at bilateral ties between India and Austria. 75 years of India-Austria ties. India-Austria trade is well balanced at around $3 billion each year. Indian exports to Austria stands at 1.52 billion USD. Imports from Austria stand at 1.41 billion USD. Indian investments in Austria amount to over 1 billion USD. Austrian investments in India are at over 800 million USD. Austria offers opportunities for collaboration in multiple fields ranging from infra to startups. India-Austria Startup Bridge was launched in February 2024. 20-plus Indian startups went to Austria in June this year to participate in a startup event. India-Austria also inked a landmark comprehensive migration and mobility agreement in May 2024. Indo-Austrian cultural relations have roots dating back to the 16th century. Teaching of Sanskrit at Vienna University started in 1845. The Indian Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore visited Vienna in 1921 and again in 1926. Even Indian artists, including Ustad Amjad Ali Khan, Zakir Hussain and Pandit Hariprasad Chaurasia, have performed shows in Austria. Today, Austria is home to over 31,000 Indians, fostering robust people-to-people connections between the two countries. With Prime Minister Modi's historic visit, the Indo-Austrian relationship is set to make substantial strides across all sectors of mutual interest. Meher Mercury's report, DD India.
Still to come on DD India News Hour. New Delhi to host BIMSTEC foreign ministers for a two-day meeting starting Thursday. And NATO leaders seek to bolster Ukraine at a summit in Washington, D.C.
Voice of a rising aspirational world. Stories of challenges, struggles and accomplishment. A world battling conflict, hunger and poverty. Embracing growth, development, science and technology. A voice of progress, a voice of unity. Watch Voice of the Global South with me, Akshay Dongre, only on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. The world watches as NATO member states firm up their alliance as part of the 75th anniversary of the bloc in Washington, D.C. Leading their agenda is the 2-plus-year standoff between the West and Russia over Ukraine. NATO allies say that they have begun transferring F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine to help bolster its defenses. For more, we are joined by DD India correspondent Nick Harper. Nick, Now, would new aid for Ukraine top the summit agenda, or do you think world leaders would be discussing other vexing security issues such as the Israel-Gaza conflict and China?
I mean, it's interesting because I think it's part of all of those things. Undoubtedly, Ukraine is topping the agenda, but Israel and Gaza, and importantly, China, are also being mentioned here during this summit. We're really now into the meat of the proper day one of this summit, a big working session about to get underway. In the last hour or so, the Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg, has said that there will be a substantial package of aid for Ukraine announced during the course of this summit. The likelihood is that it could be in the region of about 40 billion euros in total. You mentioned those F-16s. On top of that, we already know a pledge from the alliance to provide 5 air defense systems to Ukraine, one of those coming from the United States. Those are the type of things that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says would help to prevent the attack that we saw just a few days ago on the Children's Hospital in Kiev. On top of that, we will see a discussion about a path to membership to the NATO alliance for Ukraine. But I think it's worth noting the issue of China, because that is also in the background here. 4 alliance partners have been welcomed: Australia, New Zealand, Japan and South Korea, really putting an emphasis on security in the Indo-Pacific as well as security in Europe as well. Volodymyr Zelensky is likely to push those 4 partner countries for aid to Ukraine, but we could see out of the back of this summit a communique from the whole of the NATO alliance in which they label China as a decisive enabler of Russia's war in Ukraine due to China's support, but also its military backing of Russia's invasion. So China also very much playing a part, and NATO trying to straddle the whole of the world, not just looking at security in Europe, but also what's taking place in the Indo-Pacific as well.
Nick, would Biden be also hoping that the summit will help him stage a comeback of sorts after questions were raised about his age and his ability to lead?
Yeah, this is a huge moment for President Biden. He knows that he needs to perform during this summit. The eyes of the world effectively are on him because world leaders are coming here essentially looking for reassurance from the American leader that he is fit for re-election. Plenty of problems swirling for him at the moment. Many lawmakers within his own party have been coming forward to say they do not think that he should be standing for re-election. Even just a few hours ago, the very influential Democrat Nancy Pelosi, the former House Speaker, said that the idea of Joe Biden being fit for re-election had not yet been decided. She's urging Democrats to park the discussion of it until after NATO is over, but then she feels a robust conversation still needs to take place. And in the last few minutes, the news that George Clooney, the Hollywood actor, but also Biden fundraiser, says that Joe Biden should suspend his campaign. Just putting out an op-ed in one of the major newspapers saying, "I love Joe Biden, but we need a new nominee." This is a man who was fundraising for Biden just a few weeks ago, now saying that Biden is a shell of his former self and really should not be running for another 4 years in office. So huge problems for Joe Biden, and certainly eyes will be on him during his public appearances and his major speeches during this NATO summit.
Indeed. Nick, thank you. Appreciate it. Nick Harper there, reporting from Washington, D.C. And staying in the U.S., the country's President Joe Biden is under scrutiny, as Nick was reporting there, over his physical and mental health. Now, this after his disastrous presidential debate with Republican rival Donald Trump. A growing number of Democrats in the U.S. legislature are calling on Biden to end his re-election bid. Mikey Sherrill became the 7th lawmaker to call on Biden publicly to drop out of the race, saying in a statement that the stakes are too high and the threat is too real to stay silent. Many more have expressed worries that Biden has not done enough in the ensuing days to convince voters that the debate was an aberration rather than a true reflection of his abilities. But Biden continues to argue that he is best positioned to defeat 78-year-old former U.S. President Donald Trump, whom he casts as a singular threat to U.S. democracy. Meanwhile, Moscow is closely monitoring the NATO summit in Washington, D.C. The Kremlin says NATO has regularly declared its aim to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia on the battlefield and is taking part directly in the Ukrainian conflict on the side of Ukraine. Dasha Chernyshova has more from Moscow.
Moscow says it will closely monitor a NATO summit in Washington as the alliance is fighting on Kyiv's side. Russian presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Moscow would follow with the greatest attention the rhetoric at the talks and the decisions that will be taken and put on paper in Washington, all that given NATO's hostile stance towards Russia. Moscow also insists that NATO is unwilling to listen to Russia's concerns or any peace initiatives on settling the Ukrainian conflict. It also says that Kyiv's allegations that Russia deliberately hit a children's hospital in Kyiv is a provocation aimed at asking NATO for more military aid. Russia says NATO's aggression has led to the conflict in Ukraine in the first place, and the continuous supplies of weapons is also escalating the tensions. Moscow says that finding a negotiated solution is possible and Russia has never walked out from the negotiations table. Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow, reporting for DD India.
Now, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov warned that Russia would retaliate if the UK permits Ukraine to use British weapons to attack Russia. Peskov's comment on Wednesday followed media reports that new UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer might allow Ukraine to use British Storm Shadow missiles to target Russian military sites. Peskov also acknowledged that Russia's military is working to establish a buffer zone in Ukraine's Kharkiv region, but this will require more time. Right, moving on, India's External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar will host his counterparts from BIMSTEC member states for the second Foreign Ministers Retreat in New Delhi on the 11th and 12th of July. Discussions will be held to broaden and deepen cooperation across various sectors, including in the fields of security, connectivity, trade and investment, and people-to-people contacts in the Bay of Bengal region. The first edition of the BIMSTEC Foreign Ministers Retreat was held at Bangkok in Thailand on 17th July 2023. Now, BIMSTEC has 7 members: India, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar and Thailand. Bhutan's Foreign Minister D.N. Dungyel and Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Myanmar U Than Sway arrived in New Delhi on Wednesday. India said that it stands ready to share the benefits of its Prime Minister Gati Shakti platform with Sri Lanka. Prime Minister Gati Shakti, also known as National Master Plan for Multimodal Connectivity, is an Indian mega project worth $1.2 trillion to provide a competitive advantage for manufacturing in India. The message was conveyed during an Indian delegation's visit to Colombo. The delegation met Sri Lanka's Minister of Ports, Shipping and Aviation, Nimal Siripala de Silva. China's President Xi Jinping said that China is willing to work with Bangladesh to build a comprehensive strategic cooperative partnership in a bilateral meeting with Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in Beijing on Wednesday. Prime Minister Hasina is on a 4-day state visit to China until the 12th of July. Xi said that China will work with Bangladesh to contribute to the development and prosperity of the South Asian region and the Global South. Prime Minister Hasina thanked China for the support after her party Awami League won a 4th consecutive term in parliamentary election. Mauritius virtually hosted the 8th Deputy National Security Advisor level meeting of the Colombo Security Conclave on Wednesday. Bangladesh joined the Colombo Security Conclave as the 5th member state. The meeting saw participation from India, Maldives and Sri Lanka, with Seychelles as an observer state. The meeting reviewed the previous decisions taken at the meeting and discussed the progress of activities under the conclave's roadmap. The 7th NSA level meeting of the conclave will be held in India later this year. And still to come on DD India News Hour. A discussion on India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Austria and Russia. And micro, small and medium enterprises are hoping for significant relief from India's national budget to be presented on the 23rd of July.
We just don't bring you the news as it unfolds. We get to the heart of the matter.
We don't just present facts, we demystify complex social, political and economic events.
We break stories that shape the world's present and future because you deserve the truth.
I am Tanvi Taneja from New Delhi.
I'm Ollie Barrett from London.
I'm Nick Harper from Washington, D.C.
Join us on DD India Global Monday to Friday at these times.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. Let me get you some more news now. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's just concluded visit to Russia was an extraordinary testament to the enduring bond between the two nations. From the grandeur of New Delhi to a warm reception in Moscow, the visit underscored shared values and aspirations. The discussions spanned diverse topics from their special and privileged strategic partnership to cultural exchanges. The talks reaffirmed Modi and Putin's commitment to mutual growth and prosperity. The visit highlighted the respect and camaraderie between the two leaders, reflecting a strong foundation of friendship and cooperation. 9 agreements were signed on the occasion. Syed Absarul Hassan puts the visit in perspective for you.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Russia signifies a momentous chapter in the enduring relationship between India and Russia. Throughout the visit, Prime Minister Modi emphasized the shared values of democracy, sovereignty and mutual respect that have long defined the Indo-Russian relationship. He underscored the importance of economic collaboration, stressing the potential for growth and innovation through joint ventures in sectors such as technology, energy and defense.
मैं मेरे देश के किसानों को फर्टिलाइजर में मुसीबत में नहीं आने दिया। फर्टिलाइजर की उनकी जो आवश्यकता है उसकी पूरी करने में हम सफल रहे और उसमें हमारी मित्रता का भी बहुत बड़ा रोल है.
During PM Modi's 2-day visit to Russia, New Delhi and Moscow signed 9 MOUs and agreements in several sectors, including trade, climate and research. These 9 agreements include MOU to facilitate further increase in trade and joint investment projects between two countries, MOU for establishing joint working group on the issues of climate change and low carbon development, MOU for cooperation in the study of polar environments and their variability by sharing resources and data and logistics in polar regions, MOU for cooperation and collaboration on broadcasting between Prasar Bharati and ANO TV Novosti, Russia Today TV channel, MOU to ensure availability of high-quality medicines for human use through exchange of information and capacity building, cooperation agreement to facilitate settlement of civil law disputes of commercial nature. India's Prime Minister Modi was conferred Russia's highest state award, the Order of Saint Andrew the Apostle, for his outstanding efforts to promote partnership and friendship between India and Russia. He was the first Indian leader to be conferred with such award. On Tuesday, Prime Minister Modi addressed the gathering of Indian community in Moscow for the first time in his 3rd tenure. He lauded their contribution in enhancing the India-Russia relationship. Prime Minister also visited the All-Russian Exhibition Centre. The two leaders toured the Rosatom Pavilion. PM Modi laid wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier in Moscow that is dedicated to the Soviet soldiers who lost their lives during the Second World War. Indeed, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Russia marked not just a chapter but a milestone in the enduring relationship between India and Russia, a relationship built on trust, respect and a shared commitment to a brighter future for generations to come. Syed Absarul Hassan's report for DD India.
Addressing a special briefing in Vienna on Prime Minister's visit to Austria, India's Foreign Secretary Vinay Mohan Quatra said India has been consistent to point out that dialogue and diplomacy are the only solutions and not war.
We clearly brought out that the dialogue and diplomacy and not the battlefront war is a way forward in finding a solution to this. In discussing this, Prime Minister was also very clear that whatever contribution India can make in arriving at that peaceful solution through dialogue and diplomacy, we would be very, very happy to make that contribution.
Speaking on India-EU relations, the Foreign Secretary said negotiations are ongoing for a free trade agreement and it has to be prioritized at a quicker pace.
India-EU free trade agreement has been under negotiation for over 23 years. Prime Minister Modi and Austrian Chancellor agreed that this is an awfully long time for discussions to have been dragged on, and they agreed that this is something that both India and the EU should prioritize in terms of taking it forward at a quicker pace.
After the official engagements, several prominent personalities met India's Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, in Vienna. Among them was Dr. Anton Zeilinger, who is a 2022 Nobel Prize winner for physics for his work on quantum entanglement. He met Prime Minister Modi after his summit meeting with the Austrian Chancellor in Vienna.
It was a very pleasant discussion. We discussed about spiritual things. We talked about the possibilities of quantum information, quantum technology, and about how the basic fundamental ideas of quantum physics. But I experienced him as a very spiritual person. And I think this is a feature which many leaders, or more leaders in the world, should have today.
And India's Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, also met four Indologists, Martin Ginzel, Birgit Kellner, Borrain Larios and Karin Preisendans in Vienna. All right, joining me for more on the Indian Prime Minister's visit to Austria and Russia is Mr. T.P. Srinivasan. Mr. Srinivasan is a former Indian ambassador to Austria. He is also a former permanent representative of India to the United Nations in Vienna and governor for India at the International Atomic Energy Agency, also in Vienna. Ambassador, welcome to DD India News Hour. Now, how would you describe the optics and outcomes from the India-Austria talks?
Well, both optics and substance appear to be very good as far as I can see from here, because it's an open society, an open country, very friendly with India, so nothing could have gone wrong. Of course, the EU trade is not Austria's responsibility alone. It's a long, old story. And the fact that the two leaders have agreed to speed it up gives you some relief. But I myself dealt with it, and it was always on the threshold of completion. But something or the other, because several states are involved, it kept going on. But otherwise, bilateral relations, I don't know the details, but I'm sure they must have all been given a new, a new life in that sense, because two leaders, when they sit and discuss, many things will come up, and those may have been resolved there. But certainly, the optics-wise, they were all very friendly and very out of their way to be comfortable, make the Prime Minister comfortable. Of course, Moscow also, there was no immediate problems, but the problems there are much more difficult.
Right.
And Prime Minister was pushing something which President Putin was not very attentive to. Because the war, he has his own plans, and he did not seem to have shared his plans with the Prime Minister. So that's a disadvantage. But on the bilateral front, Russia visit was very substantial.
Okay.
Number of things that they have agreed on, from military to space to science to various things, agreements have been reached, and it looks as though this is one of the most significant joint statements recently coming out of Moscow.
Right.
And it's elaborate, and it may cause some concern among some people that India is getting so close to the use to Russia, because it also involves defense and supply of technology and space and nuclear. Particularly the nuclear aspect may cause some concern in even India, that Kudankulam is to be expanded. Kudankulam itself, even now, it is not considered perfect or safe. So that may cause some concern in India itself.
Right.
But no other country is coming forward. That was the expectation earlier.
Right.
France and the US were supposed to build reactors in India, but they have turned away from that, and therefore our only option is the Russian. And since the Kudankulam belongs to the same kind of reactor which had caused an accident, there is some concern about that. But that expansion is also very important from our perspective, because after the nuclear deal with the United States, we haven't got a single reactor from any country.
Right.
So this is the only way out for us to expand our electricity program.
Indeed. Ambassador, you've served in Austria for about 3 to 4 years. Correct me if I'm wrong, but between 2000 and 2004?
2001 early and 2004.
Right. Now, Austria swears by neutrality. It is written into the country's constitution. No wonder then that Austria is not a member of NATO, and that fits perfectly well into the messaging of the Indian Prime Minister's visit to Austria, is it not?
Yes, that was the very purpose of his going to Austria, to point out that he has nothing against Europe, nothing against European Union, nothing about Western civilization, none of that. And so he didn't want it to be just a visit to Moscow with all its complications and possibilities. So it was a clear signal that we respect sovereignty and freedom of countries, we respect all systems, and we are able to work with everyone. We have to be close to Russia at this point, because we have several reasons to build our defense and also develop our technology.
Right.
And for that, not many are forthcoming. There are difficulties after G20. You know that India has been paying a price for our success, because since then there have been so much of publicity against India in the Western media, particularly United States and UK. And that had vitiated the atmosphere. In fact, they even spread rumors that India will rig the elections and so on. Now nobody is talking about that. That is out of the way. But still they have suspicions about India's democracy and so on. So this has to be rectified. And this discussion with President Putin himself and also Austria may have clarified some of those thoughts.
Ambassador, you spoke at some length on both India-Russia and India-Austria ties. I have to ask you this in the larger context, the big picture that's coming out from his visit to both countries. Now, Prime Minister Modi says that dialogue and diplomacy are the only way forward for global peace. Now, that global crises cannot be resolved on the battlefield. Can India, or is India ably suited and equipped to play the role of a peacemaker?
Well, that is not the intention. I don't think we have any intention to mediate between Russia and Ukraine, because there is no possibility. Many countries in the world are ready to do that. But ours is more a kind of advice as well as a warning. And that is what he has done also earlier when he said that this is not the age of war. So the same thing he reiterated. But what the Western countries are wanting is that we should denounce Russia, which we are not willing to do, because we have so many connections and we have so much interest, because we do not belong to a military alliance of any kind. And therefore we need to have friends everywhere. And that is why we are working with every country, because we have to have our connections, and we have connections with the West. We have joint exercises with several Western countries, and how can you exclude Russia? So it's a simple and pure logic. And therefore, our advice is that, and that of course is not a new advice, everybody knows what it means. Pandit Nehru spoke only about peace in the initial years. So this is an Indian DNA, we would certainly say that. But that may disappoint some people that we are not doing anything more than that, but there's nothing more we can do. Because if they want to stop the war, what prevents them from stopping it? So obviously, they have other interests, and that is why President Putin was very quiet about that particular aspect. On terrorism, he was very vocal. He said terrorism must be stopped, and we both have dangers from terrorism, and that is understandable. But beyond that, wars themselves, particularly bilateral wars, and a war waged by a permanent member of the Security Council, that is a very serious matter. The permanent members of the Security Council are expected to stop wars, not start wars and then veto. So there is fundamental flow of the United Nations which is being exhibited. So these are not things cannot be solved very easily, but we give our counsel and express our views, and that is our freedom we always exercise. We are quite forthright in saying these things to any country.
All right, we leave it at that. Ambassador Srinivasan, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts and views with our viewers at home and abroad. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Right, moving on in other news, India would present its budget on the 23rd of July. Micro, small and medium enterprises are hoping for significant relief from it. They're seeking relaxation in taxes, a streamlined goods and services tax processes, and overall improvement in ease of doing business. Now, this is crucial for the sector, which accounts for 63 million registered enterprises.
The MSME sector accounts for 30% of the country's gross domestic product or GDP. It's the second largest employer after agriculture. The share of exports from products specified for MSMEs constitute 45.5% of the country's total exports. The government can play a pivotal role in driving technology adoption across MSMEs by providing financial incentives, framing supporting policies, and setting up an R&D fund for MSMEs.
Our goal is that the value addition today, which is at about 18 to 20%, doubles to about 35 to 40% in the next 5 years, and we are able to take forward the component manufacturing ecosystem, and there the role of MSMEs is going to be really significant.
There are three key challenges constraining sustainable growth in the MSME sector: get paid, get capital, and get digital.
By using digital tools, MSMEs can gain access to much wider markets and supply chains and get discovered by millions of consumers in India and the globe.
India's MSME network, currently housing 633.9 lakh enterprises, hold immense potential to drive India's mission of becoming the third largest global economy by 2027 and achieving Viksit Bharat by 2047. MSMEs have emerged as the backbone of India's economy and are playing a critical role in propelling innovation across the country. Bureau Report, DD India.
Now, rating agency Moody's has kept India's economic growth forecast for 2024 unchanged at 6.8%, while predicting a 6.5% growth for 2025. It said that increasing domestic and overseas demand supports GDP growth in emerging markets with wide variation by country. In its Global Macro Outlook 2024-2025 published in March, Moody's raised its forecast for India's GDP growth in 2024 from 6.1% to 6.8%, reflecting both global and domestic optimism in the country's economy on the back of robust manufacturing activity and infrastructure spending. Aligning with India's Prime Minister Mr. Modi's vision of making India self-reliant, the production-linked incentive scheme for telecom and networking products have led to a significant increase in production, employment generation, economic growth and exports. Within 3 years of the telecom PLI scheme, it has attracted an investment of more than $400 million. Telecom equipment production has exceeded nearly $6 billion, with exports totaling $1.2 billion, creating more than 17,800 direct jobs and many more indirect jobs. It underscores robust growth and competitiveness of India's telecom manufacturing industry, driven by government initiatives to promote local production and reduce import dependency. The PLI scheme aims to enhance domestic manufacturing capabilities and make India a global hub for telecom equipment production. The scheme also offers financial incentives to manufacturers based on their incremental sales from products manufactured in India. From the banks of the Brahmaputra to Bihar's flood-stricken plains, India's monsoon paints a tale of challenge and resilience. As waters recede in Assam, Bihar's Gandak and Kosi surge with monsoon's might. The India Meteorological Department warns of more rain for the east, while Maharashtra, Goa and Karnataka brace for a downpour.
In Assam, the flood situation has shown signs of improvement as rainfall intensity decreased in recent days. However, the Brahmaputra and several other rivers continue to flow above the danger mark in some areas. Moving on to other parts of the country, people in Bihar are grappling with flood-like situation. Heavy rainfall in Bihar and neighbouring Nepal led to rising water levels in rivers like Gandak and Kosi. India's Met Office forecasts severe rainfall in the northeastern states and adjoining eastern regions over the next 2 to 3 days.
अगर अभी का स्थिति देखते हैं तो मॉनसून ट्रफ का सरफेस में तो वो अभी भी बंगाल की खाड़ी में है, जिसके कारण से मॉइस्चर थोड़ा बहुत नॉर्थ इंडिया में जा रही है, मगर थोड़ा अपर लेवल्स में ऑलरेडी मॉनसून ट्रफ नॉर्थ की तरफ शिफ्ट करना शुरू कर दिया है. ये नॉर्थ की तरफ शिफ्ट करने से हमारा जो बारिश का जो स्थिति है, आपका नॉर्थ इंडिया के और नॉर्थ और ईस्ट इंडिया की अगर बात करें तो प्राइमरीली हमारे ईस्ट और नॉर्थ ईस्ट इंडिया में भी बारिश बढ़ेगी, यानी कि सब हिमालयन, वेस्ट बंगाल, सिक्किम, वेस्ट असम, वेस्ट मेघालय, इन सभी रीजन्स में आज एक्सट्रीमली हैवी और कल शायद SHW में कल भी एक्सट्रीमली रहेगी.
Additionally, heavy rainfall is expected in Maharashtra, Goa and coastal Karnataka over the next 5 days. Meanwhile, officials reported disruptions on the Konkan railway route due to waterlogging inside a tunnel at Pernem in Goa on Wednesday. This led to the cancellation and diversion of several trains.
देखिए, इस पूरे कार्य में इस टनल के अंदर 100 से अधिक मजदूर लगे हैं और उनके 20 से 25 सुपरवाइजर्स हैं और हमारे चीफ इंजीनियर तक लेवल के अधिकारी अंदर मौजूद हैं. इसके अलावा हमारे कुछ कंसल्टेंट्स हैं टनल के, वो मौजूद हैं और कुछ हमारे एक इंटरनेशनल कंसल्टेंट हैं, वो भी थोड़ी देर में पहुंचेंगे. हम सभी लोग मिलकर के इस कार्य को कर रहे हैं.
In northern states like Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand, heavy rains have caused waterlogging. In Uttarakhand's Chamoli district, a landslide near a tunnel on the Badrinath National Highway blocked the route, with a large rock falling onto the road. Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, Yogi Adityanath, conducted aerial survey of flood-affected areas of Puranpur, Sadar Tehsil, Bisalpur Tehsil in Pilibhit and Hapur. The monsoon has also lashed parts of Chhattisgarh's Raipur, Noida and some areas of Amritsar. With Bureau Inputs, Rabindra Chauhan's report for DD India.
In Nepal, the monsoon season has brought various challenges and havoc due to the heavy rainfall and flooding. 83 people have so far died in disaster-related incidents, including landslides and floods triggered by relentless rains across the country. The police headquarters said that 33 men, 25 women and 25 children have died in such incidents in various parts of the country between June 10th and today. And now to news from the world of sport. In cricket, India produced a clinical effort to beat Zimbabwe by 23 runs in the third T20 in Harare and take a 2-1 lead in the 5-match series. India's President Draupadi Murmu unveiled the Durand Cup 2024 trophies at a function held at the Rashtrapati Bhavan Cultural Centre in New Delhi on Wednesday. First played in 1888, the Durand Cup is India's oldest football tournament. It serves as an opener for the Indian domestic season. The Durand Cup 2024 football tournament will kickstart on the 27th of July, with the final scheduled to take place at Salt Lake Stadium in Kolkata on the 31st of August. Spain struck twice in 5 minutes in a pulsating first half to secure a 2-1 win over France in a Euro 2024 semi-final. A record-breaking goal from teenager Lamine Yamal and a Dani Olmo effort propelled it into the final. The final will be played in Berlin on Sunday. Defending champion Argentina beat Canada 2-0 in the U.S. state of New Jersey on Tuesday to seal its place in the Copa America final. Julian Alvarez and Lionel Messi goals helped Argentina maintain its domination throughout. Argentina soaked up some early pressure before Alvarez ghosted in between two defenders to open the scoring with a tidy finish in the 22nd minute. Messi doubled the lead in the 51st minute. Argentina will take on either Uruguay or Colombia in the final in the U.S. state of Florida on Sunday. India's legendary batter Sunil Gavaskar turned 75 on Wednesday. The former India captain and one of the greatest opening batters of all time played 125 tests and 108 one-day internationals for India. He was the first batter to score more than 10,000 runs in Test cricket with 34 centuries. In the shorter format, Gavaskar made 3,092 runs with an unbeaten 103 as his highest. Born in Mumbai on 10th July 1949, Gavaskar dominated fast bowlers with his unbreachable defence and near-perfect batting technique. He played international cricket from 1971 to 1987. He was a part of India's World Cup winning team in 1983. Today, he works as a commentator. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of DD India News Hub. You can get all the latest news and updates on the DD India mobile app. It's available on Android and iOS platforms. You can scan the QR code on the screen to download it. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram. You can also check out our website ddindia.co.in. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. All of us here in New Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India News Hour.